There we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Americans and world citizens in support of liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the wearej6.com weekly live stream. We are very excited, as always, to have all of you joining us today. We have a really awesome panel for you, so that's pretty exciting. And as you can see, we have some pretty interesting news developments that have happened related to President Trump and the J6 topic. So we're going to get into all of that. I'm going to first welcome joining us today. We have Joshua Phillip from Epoch Times. We have Dr. Simone Gold from Frontline Doctors and Gold Care. We have Professor David Clements, and we have Stuart Rhodes from the Oath Keepers. And we may have another panelist or two joining us momentarily. And as we mentioned, there's some pretty exciting breaking news developments to get into off the top here. But before we actually do that, to start, we have always opened the weekly live streams with a prayer to acknowledge the presence of Almighty God, and certainly to seek His grace and providence in this moment that we're all working through, and in the efforts we're engaged in pursuing. So with that, I'm just going to humbly ask God's help. Father God, we acknowledge that you're God, and that you are here, that we are one nation under God, that the whole American experiment is absolutely based on that recognition that there's a higher power beyond each one of us as individual humans, and particularly that we have sacred dignity as humans and fundamental rights that do not come from the government such that they could be taken away, but those rights come from you, God. And with those rights come responsibility. And with that responsibility comes the need to seek your assistance, your wisdom, your power and strength, God, because as we will inevitably learn, we can't do this on our own in our own strength. And the founders understood that. And I think we're reawakening to that in today's moment. So God, we just truly, legitimately seek your presence here on this panel today. Ask the Holy Spirit would fill me in the words I say, and everyone else, that our speech would be empowered by you, gracious, loving, respectful, unifying. And God, we ask you to grant us victory. We ask you to grant us success and progress in the pursuit of restorative justice as we continue to discuss what that means. The many different people who are still hurting very badly right now, the damage and repair that we seek to restore, and the unity that we want to pursue in building in our nation once again. So we thank you, God, for your goodness, your grace. So thank you for these people joining us today. And it's in our Heavenly Father's name that we ask. Amen. Amen. So thank you guys so much for being here. We're super excited. I think it would be probably appropriate to go ahead and play this clip that was really interesting to see President Trump reference some comments related to J6. So let's play that and then get your guys' reaction here.
No one has spoken as boldly and with as much truth as you about Ashley Babbitt. It was a bad shooting. My father can tell you that. Anybody.
It's a terrible thing.
I don't know if you know this, but the Department of Justice right now is still kind of fighting that case. The family of Ashley Babbitt is suing the government, wrongful death. The DOJ right now officially is still opposing that lawsuit, trying to justify it. Shouldn't that be something that can just be settled at this point?
Well, I'll look into that. I mean, you're just telling me that for the first time. I haven't heard that. I'm a big fan of Ashley Babbitt, okay? And Ashley Babbitt was a really good person who was a big MAGA fan, Trump fan, and she was innocently standing there. They even say trying to sort of hold back the crowd. And a man did something to her that was unthinkable when he shot her. And I think it's a disgrace. I'm going to look into that. I did not know that, no.
And the officer who shot her, Michael Byrd, is still on duty. They gave him a raise, and they gave him a medal, and I believe a promotion.
I think it's a disgrace.
He's a federal employee. Would you or could you do something about that?
I'm going to take a look at it. I'm going to look at that, too. His reputation was I won't even say, let's find out about his reputation, okay? We're going to find out. But I watched that and I saw that. And by the way, she was killed, but nobody else was killed. And, you know, the people that went down there, they had no guns. They didn't have guns. There was something to do with the FBI. There was something to do with Antifa and others, and it wasn't mentioned. And there's never been a group of people, I think, with the exception of maybe over the years, a couple of groups were treated pretty harshly, but essentially never treated so badly. And as you know, I let them out with pardons. I know you were very happy. I watch your show all the time. You were extremely happy about it. And plenty of other people were too. People don't realize this whole movement that we have is just it's a very inspiring thing, what's happened to our country. These people are incredible people. They were treated so unfairly, so horribly. Some of them didn't even go into the building. And the judges, the system, the hatred, the vitriol, the prosecutors, the way they wanted to destroy these people. People would go in and they would be so proud to go before court, and they'd have a good lawyer, and they'd walk out of court like devastated the way they were treated, devastated, given years in prison. No, but I took care of them. I said I was going to, and I did.
Is there any talk of, because they lost opportunity, they lost income, any kind of compensation fund? Or
well, there's
like
talk about that. We have a lot of people talk about it. A lot of the people that are in government now talk about it because a lot of the people in government really like that group of people. They were patriots as far as I was concerned. I talk about them a lot. They were treated very unfairly, you know?
Wow. So there you have it. And I just want to say that we are J6. We call this a strategic alliance, and it's a First Amendment association of free persons. It is simply Americans connecting, gathering, discussing, unifying, and working together to pursue this idea of restorative justice. And restorative justice certainly must include financial restitution and the practical considerations of how to repair people that have been so badly damaged. But it goes far beyond that to understanding the danger to the American experiment that occurred and is still a problem. And in addressing those concerns, as we've been gathering and talking about this, one of our primary objectives, one of our kind of main priorities is to acknowledge how important it is to be unified and also educated. So we need to grow this movement, and we need to grow the impact of the message that we have to share, the stories that we have to share, and allowing people to understand the truth about what happened, because that kind of force multiplication of the truth and of information is what is driving conversations like what we just watched and empowering President Trump and his administration to understand what needs to be done and to know that they have the willpower and the pathway, like the political pathway, the legal pathway, and just the practical pathway to get where we know we need to be going as a nation. So I thought that was very exciting to see that clip. I think it should inspire all of us in our own lives generally, but certainly in this context, the platform that we're inviting everyone to participate here at wearej6.com. So please continue to register at the website and share it. We have social media profiles, of course, share that. It is a force multiplication effort that really is at the heart of what we're doing. So the more you guys all get excited and get involved in that, the more successful I think that we will be. I would actually like to open up to reaction to that clip and kind of the moment to anyone. So please, you guys are all free to kind of jump in as you would. Who had an instant reaction to that clip? Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, so I mean, President Trump's been rock solid throughout. Correctly, he stood and said that the election was stolen. He stuck to his guns on that,
Yes,
illegal and unconstitutional. And then from day one, he's also been on our side. He knows more than anybody else. He knows what it's like to be politically targeted and have lawfare. Like in the Meet the Press interview, he said, "I know the system. It's a very nasty system, and he knows it. He does know it. So I'm not surprised that he's in favor of prosecuting Ashley Babbitt, her murderer, Officer Bird. Yeah.
Michael Bird. Yeah.
So, right. So, but here's the problem is that the DOJ is still, as an institution, prosecutors being the way they are, they're used to, just as a default, defending the government's position. They're also used to, as a default, rewarding those who cooperate and hammering those who don't. And so I have to wonder, like, there's 14 of us that got commuted only. I'm one of them.
Right.
There's like 9 Oath Keepers and 5 Proud Boys, I believe. A lot of us veterans lost all our benefits. So I think that President Trump, there's a difference, or there's a disconnect between what President Trump believes and knows and wants, and what the default is for the lawyers around him. So I'm concerned that, while he wants it done, he's not even aware that it's not being done. His will is not being carried out, and I'm very concerned about that.
Yeah, actually, if I can say, I think restorative justice is going to be more than even just, financial compensation. I think that in order to clear the names of the individuals who are arrested and charged and, just dragged through the ringer, I think it's important to recognize what actually took place. Aside from the entire misrepresentation of why people were there that day, there was a speaking event at the Capitol. And I don't know how that got forgotten by most media. But even aside from that, aside from the need, I think, to investigate maybe the strange incidents that did take place, which, at Epic Times, we did a lot of reporting on, a lot of investigations on. And there were a lot of very odd things that took place on January 6th, which do warrant an additional investigation. But even aside from that, the media, the big corporate media, for 4 years, had nonstop coverage of this. And the amount of defamation, and I would call it defamation, that has been committed against the individuals, who were prosecuted, dragged through the ringer, even aside from imprisonment and solitary confinement, even just the way that they were portrayed by the media, even the way they were portrayed in, what was, in my opinion, really just incomplete investigations, destroyed evidence, false testimony, which, we can verify a lot of it was false, right? People did lie under oath. The destruction of evidence, the whole mess. This had the effect of just destroying people's reputations to such a massive extent in order to maintain what I would say was, at the very least, a partial narrative, but I would go so far as to say just an absolutely false narrative. And I think to clear that up will also be necessary. They can't just, give people a paycheck and say, hey, go wander into the night. They need to restore people's reputations. And that does require additional investigation, I think.
I agree. Absolutely, Joshua. I also think it's a perfect point in terms of, I've been saying this for a while, but we'll continue to articulate this. Yes, their reputations need to be restored, and the public needs to be informed, educated, and really brought face to face with the ugly reality of what happened. But the financial repair, which is clearly necessary, is directly linked to that defamation that you just talked about. So one thing that we're talking about with the lawyers we're working with, and again, wearej6.com, it's a strategic alliance to help coordinate all the J6ers with the best legal minds and other policymakers that are working alongside of the Trump administration to get the correct result accomplished. And part of that process is determining what actually happened to all of these people at various levels. What is the consequence of that? What's the cost of that fallout? How do you put a price tag on a life? People died. How do you put a price tag on permanent PTSD from these violent SWAT team raids that were terrorist operations, the government operating as a terrorist organization against its own people? That is absolutely what happened. The public needs to stare that in the face. But how do you put a price tag on that? How do you put a price tag on the defamation, Joshua, that you just acknowledged? In our estimation, being indicted as a J6er itself was one of the costliest forms of damage that was incurred. Now, going to prison is no cheap trick. Like, That is a terrible thing for someone to endure when it's wrongful, when it's unjust, particularly. And there's significant financial costs associated with having your freedom wrongfully taken away for days, weeks, months, years at a time. That's before we get into isolation, abuse, etc. But simply being indicted, even if you weren't put in prison, you were tarred and feathered, branded in the most permanent and ugly way imaginable. Joshua articulated it really well. And
Well,
that is
and just one more point on that too.
people's lives.
I mean, even people who were not arrested were harassed. I mean, put on lists. I have a friend actually who he was never arrested, but every time he flew in an airplane, they had a federal marshal. He even confronted the marshal and he confirmed it.
Yeah.
He was called into the FBI to, hey, you want to come visit kind of thing, and he's like, not really. Do I have to? But even people who were not arrested faced things like that. And so it was even beyond, I mean, the scope of this was massive. Even myself as a journalist, I had people calling for me to be prosecuted merely for reporting the truth. And so even people who were willing to investigate and report this were facing pressure. I mean, that's how big this was.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Golden. It will continue to be.
I just want to say one of the reasons we do this is to keep reminding people that we understand the word restorative is much broader than any one individual's financial. All of these facets are important. People's lives are wrecked and they need help in that area is a fact. But anyone who's touched J6, and it was interesting to hear Joshua say this because he's so close to J6 without being a J6er, he instinctively understood that the harm stemmed from the indictments. From the moment you were indicted, your life was derailed on a massive scale. And then as John said, jail, all that other prison, all that other thing. But we absolutely understand that. Part of the communications with the lawyers is making sure they understand it, because it's easy for the lawyers to think that the prison and the solitary and all of those things and the trial and the hard costs are understandable. But unless you're very close to it, you don't understand what happened just from being indicted, or Epoch Times just for reporting on it. I mean, it's very broad. One of the reasons we wanted to play that clip for you, even though we know many of you have seen it, is what I'm very struck by and take a lot of encouragement by, is that this is actually super personal. If you go back and play it again, part of what Donald Trump is saying were things he's offended at, that things he personally directly observed. Later on in the clip, he talks about Pelosi's daughter filming that it was her fault, and then that video is missing. He's directly experienced the deep state in many, many, many ways, but specifically on J6. That's super encouraging. So I agree with you, Stuart, that lawyers around him maybe don't do exactly what he wants or his heart, but this is a man who himself felt the same victimization that happened to us. And I just want to say that we all understand that this is much bigger than any one person's financial. I just want to answer a couple questions that people had dropped in. People wanted to know how you can sue the government. In general, you cannot sue the government. The government has sovereign immunity, meaning it has to give permission to be sued. But there are a few exceptions. We clearly fit into one. The biggest exceptions are the Federal Tort Claims Act and the Bivens claims, I think they're called Bivens actions, which is constitutional violations. So yes, you can sue the government in certain situations. So I just wanted to make sure people knew that. Thank you.
Well, and I'd love to dig in more on Joshua's note about the need for investigations. Also on Stuart's note that entrenched bureaucracy and sort of the natural institutional inclination or direction of things, that is clearly a problem. I mean, of course, we love, support, and have a lot of confidence in President Trump as an individual, but there are legitimate concerns about everything around him. So what are your guys' thoughts about what needs to happen, and particularly what we as citizens and what we as a wearej6.com platform, because that's what we're here trying to do, is coordinate and execute actions that we can do to drive this ball forward.
Real investigation.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said a real investigation needs to happen. So I think we
What
can
does
all,
that look like, and how
help
do we
that.
make it happen?
Well, I'd like to chime in on that if I could, because I think part of the problem is that we give monopolies when it comes to the truth to captured media and a captured judiciary. And we keep waiting for a captured media and a captured judiciary to say out loud what we already know to be the truth. And so the investigations have actually already happened to the degree that we can leverage and pressure corrupt institutions to repeat the things that we've been saying for years. That's a challenge. But I think in lieu of having that expectation, we have to grow platforms. We have to grow new media. I think the Epic Times is kind of the exception, not the rule, when it comes to coverage here. Right. So, and we've seen that. And I think one of the things that's really encouraging from what Greg Kelly talked about, I mean, Greg has not backed away. And the fact that Trump's watching his program and he's talking about restoration, he's talking about settlements. I think that was the key takeaway for me, is that in order for you to have the outcome that you really want, you don't want to treat the government as an adversary when you've got someone who's receptive. So you can have a representative from the DOJ to negotiate. And part of that negotiation would go further than just dollars and cents. You should have legal protections. One of the things that I've been reminded of is the corrupt person, I think it's J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, talked about how anyone affiliated with J6 would not be employed by the state government. Well, that's a violation of equal protection. There's so many constitutional violations there alone that it appears that there needs to be an incentive for there not to have punitive actions against J6ers to enter into the marketplace. So I think this is a time where we can be really, really creative. I think we can probably revisit pardon structures to maybe carve out a new type of pardon that leads to exonerations. I mean, I know we've talked about things like pardons of innocence in the past, but it's still a black cloud that covers J6ers. And if the greatest harm that we're seeing is reputational damage, and it's something that follows you for the rest of your lives, there's got to be some mechanism with Congress to ensure that that black cloud goes away.
Part of that might be a movement to have Congress pass legislation specifically related to political targeting and political affiliation as a class of protection in terms of the equal protection guarantee of the Constitution. What do you guys think, particularly with legal backgrounds? What merit does that idea have, and is that something we could get Congress to accomplish in the short term?
I don't want to speak for everybody else, just my own opinion. I'm super focused on this group. I find it's really difficult to broaden and to get Congress to move. That's just my personal opinion. Like, that's my mission, is to see the best for this group. But that opens up opportunities going in the future, and others might feel differently.
Or if a congressional movement or legislation in terms of preventing this kind of discrimination, protecting your political affiliation as a class, J6 could be the flashpoint to highlight the need for that. I mean, the language could include specific reference to J6, but that might itself establish that kind of a precedent that people cannot be demonized and targeted because of political movements.
Yeah. Well, I think it's weird because I'm a small L libertarian, and I've historically not been a fan of the government getting involved in creating new classifications for people. But I'm conflicted when it comes to J6. I think what Stuart mentioned in particular was, what does a real investigation look like? Look, I'm not confident that Jim Jordan and everyone else are all of a sudden going to carry the torch when they've had 4 years to really shine a light. But having said that, it would be great to have the people that have been considered social pariahs, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and give them a seat at a congressional hearing. And let's hear directly from them. Let's hear directly from the people that have been slandered by the media. And if Congress will at least give people a seat at the table to share the horror stories. And what I love about this J6 movement is that you've got 1,500 at least unique stories that provides a cross section where the media has tried to basically lump everyone into the most extreme version of what MAGA is. And that's just not the case. We've got housewives, we've got veterans, we've got police officers, we've got so many people that, as Trump said, are lovely, beautiful people. And they just haven't been given a megaphone. So to the degree that this group is providing that megaphone, great, but Congress can work in tandem with us by just start having congressional hearings every week and give the people a voice.
I love that idea, and I think our group can definitely pursue that happening. So thank you for mentioning that, and we'll continue to push that forward. I just want to welcome Daniel Goodwin to the stream with StopHate.com. Works alongside of our friend David Sumrall, and have done a really amazing citizen investigative work on the ground. Also, Ivan Rakelin, thank you for being here. Ivan, do you have any updates in terms of the investigation angle? And then I know Daniel has some comments on that as well.
Yeah, not much since we talked last week, but I did have an interview at length for about 3 hours plus with Deep State, Tarek Johnson, the former lieutenant of the U.S. Capitol Police. And I think we went really methodically into the details, the inner workings, the decision-making process, and who's who, I guess, infrastructure-wise. And then we named names in those key positions. The purpose of that is to educate more people to understand what outsized role Congress, congressional leadership, and U.S. Capitol Police leadership had in the events of January 6th. And I think many of us have not shined sufficient light on that component of it. I mean, there's a lot of folks. I mean, David, hi, Joshua, Simone, Stewart, good to see you again, and Daniel. We've all kind of played a role in the collective. We're getting to the full holistic truth. But I think one of the gaps, because we've covered the weaponization by the judiciary, the weaponization by the executive branch, I could use some assistance in also shining the light on the legislative branch. And I'm talking about, most people don't know what the Capitol Police Board is. They don't know what it looks like, what it consists of, and how much authority and power they have. How can they build that leverage against other members of Congress, and then create the, I guess, frame for a January 6th, whatever you want to call it, Fedsurrection or fake surrection to take place, and how they're able to cover it up. And I think, well, that's kind of been my role. And as we take that and then add the executive branch component, weaponization, and the judiciary in the collective, I think America will see the entire government, all three branches of government, and in some instances at the state level, like my name, Tina Peters here, Free Tina Peters, we're all involved and coordinated in the coordinated weaponization to include, I mean, big tech still continues to censor Stewart Rhodes. He opened his account within, I think, 6 or 12 hours. Elon's own deep state from Twitter 1.0 nuked his account for simply asking assistance to free Jeremy Brown. So the weaponization still continues. And unfortunately, very senior people within the White House are part of facilitating that. And I'm putting together that. I hate to say that. And unfortunately, it's not, I mean, you can go after the messenger, but I didn't commit the transgressions. I'm just exposing them. So you can come after me, and you know how I feel about that. I could care less.
Right.
No, I'm glad you're putting in that work. I want to reiterate to the audience the power of the people here, the power of independent journalism and independent investigative work, and the power of force multiplying this search for the truth.
And if I may, one more thing, I just want to,
yep.
I want to amplify what David said, Clements, that our institutions, as I kind of, we've collectively proven, have failed us, right? In the collective, across Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 on this topic. And so it's really up to we the people, right? The first 3 words of the Constitution, to step forward. And you're seeing, whether it's the media with Epoch, thank you. Thank God you guys exist.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we wouldn't get the message out at scale. And then also Elon Musk, even though he does still censor through his, surrogates are probably still censoring, it still gives us an opportunity to educate the masses. Because at the end of the day, what is a congressional hearing? A congressional hearing does not normally result in a criminal referral unless you're a Democrat and Republicans allow for it. So then, in a Republican held House and Senate, we don't expect criminal referrals to come out of them. It's only an airing of grievances. So if we have more reach through our communities in the collective than any committee or subcommittee in Congress, that's what then shapes the court of public opinion that then becomes the jury pool in the courts and also impacts the judges because the community, ends up communicating to those judges to then start to reverse not only some of these decisions, but maybe we can get to the point where an Ed Martin or other U.S. attorneys throughout the country, particularly Ed Martin, because he's designated as the U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia. I mean, David, does anything stop Ed Martin from prosecuting Michael Byrd for murder? It's still within the statute of limitations. What about
They,
Lila Morris, DC Metropolitan Police Department officer? He can go after her for murder of Roseanne Boylan as well. So these are some things to consider as we start to turn the page and actually getting to the truth.
and I'd like
That's
to
what
add
I got.
one thing to that, if I could. It's
Please.
people need to understand that there's got to be a level of urgency, because while we get to cook in the lab right now and brainstorm on potential solutions, next year midterm elections, either Trump will continue to bring a sledgehammer to the deep state, or this experiment's over, which
Or
really
he's impeached again.
and it brings us back to free and fair elections. I don't think we can look over the fact that there was a recent executive order that goes a long way to ensuring that he's got a puncher's chance to make sure that he retains the House and the Senate. But a lot of these things that we're talking about from a legislative framework, we need a new crop of candidates. I'm a big proponent of people that are part of the J6 community stepping up, running for office. There might be some people here that are interested in doing that. I'm not one of them, but we really have to keep a laser focus on election integrity as well going forward, because a lot of the things that we're talking about are policy driven there. That means we have to have the right legislators. And I think many of us, just as Ivan mentioned, are a little cynical. Yeah, you can have the political theater of an airing of grievances, but does that mean that you're going to have a referral? And thus far, Pam Bondi, we're all giving her the benefit of the doubt. I hope that she is who Trump says she is.
Right.
But there seems to be a lot of appearances on TV shows and too few arrests. And at some point, if the American people don't see arrests, prosecutions, and convictions, they're just not going to have hope that the DOJ or the FBI truly have been reformed. And so this goes to Ivan's point that unless Trump is surgical in placing U.S. attorneys that are willing to, maybe they don't win at the trial level, but understanding that you have to play the long game. This has never been about getting fair trials for the J6ers. You had to have attorneys that understood that they had to have a record of legal error at every phase to bring it to the highest court. And now you've got an analysis that takes place, hopefully, with a Justice Gorsuch and Alito. And you've got a much better chance at some point in subjecting the lower courts to a standard where we revisit concepts that, to me, are pretty straightforward and clear. I mean, the fact is, J6ers, every one of you had violations of Brady versus Maryland. Every one of you were subjected to violations of the Giglio decision. Every one of you have had confrontation clause violations. And the fact that we haven't gotten a case in the J6 community all the way to the highest court to revisit concepts that have been entrenched for 60 plus years, there needs to be an opportunity for all of these violations to take place and have the Supreme Court say, something, we're not playing around anymore. We need to revisit those. And you've got no better plaintiff than the J6 plaintiff.
Dr. Gold, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of specific cases we would be looking to bring and specific ideal J6 former defendants that are optimal to bring such cases with the intent of establishing the right kinds of precedent? Because that is a very, very smart point, I think.
I mean, it is a good point, Professor, that you want to have the smartest jurists in the land ruling on these things, and we don't really have that. I guess I'm not so optimistic about another J6 case being heard at the Supreme Court in time to make a difference. I'm a little bit on the side of let's do what we can. And somebody who said that Epoch Times really made a difference, they did. We can make a difference, all of us, by getting our stories out. 5-minute stories like we've invited everyone to do, that we show at the end of every We Are J6 Saturday live stream, because those stories will change public opinion. I agree with Ivan. We don't really change policy at these congressional hearings, but I do think we change a lot of minds and opinions of people when they see these things. I do think that's it. I'm also a little bit cynical. I think the laws are written in many ways that already protect us. They just were massively disregarded.
Yeah,
The laws were there. The
that's exactly
violations
true.
were clear. So I'm not so convinced the answers come from new laws and all of this. I think we have to do the really hard work of changing people's beliefs and minds. It's really hard, but we've set up a pretty, as easy as it will get, kind of platform here in We Are J6. And it's not urgent. It's not like you have to do it this minute. But over the next few months, we want to have more and more and more videos. These 5-minute videos are really powerful. That's
Persecution testimonials, we call them. We're actually excited to let you guys know that we have been, of course, working over a number of weeks and weeks now to develop this platform as a central communal space, open invitation to everyone. Certainly asking anyone that's a J6 former defendant, a J6 patriot, you are all welcome here. We want to support you. The wearej6.com former defendant group has grown to almost 400 defendants, which is, I think, amazing. We want to see that exceed 1,000. There's over 1,500 total defendants, of course. Everyone's welcome, but the idea here is to unify, consolidate, force multiply, and strengthen each other as we share these stories. The persecution testimonials, as Dr. Gold mentioned, they're really impactful. We're going to play a new one today. We also have some other visual assets and just different ways of showcasing these people, helping to tell their stories, putting a name and a face to it, humanizing them. Because as the panelists today have mentioned, we've been maligned and destroyed in the most obscene caricature kind of way, as a tool for leftist narratives and power-driven, people and entities. So we need to dismantle that, and what we're doing here is a huge part of that, but it takes all of you. So please continue to share wearej6.com, encourage everyone to join and participate and drive, the mission forward and participate. If you are a J6er, if you're a former defendant, when you go to wearej6.com, there's a defendant registration. If you register there, we will communicate directly with you with an invitation to come on a live stream and share your story. We'll directly email you with an invitation to create a persecution testimonial, and we give you easy instructions to make it super simple to accomplish that. So Daniel Goodwin is a J6 patriot, a J6 former defendant. Daniel, thanks for joining us. Why don't you share a little bit about your J6 story?
Sure. I had it pretty mildly compared to a lot of J6ers, but basically, I was one of the early arrests, and they, did the pre-dawn, SWAT team raid led by the FBI Counterterrorism Task Force. And I had 3 weeks in solitary confinement pre-trial because they called it COVID quarantine lockdown. That was January, February 2021. Then I had 13 months of house arrest pre-trial with the ankle monitor. Yes, pre-trial. And then I could leave the house on Sundays to go to church, but I couldn't stop for gasoline on the way there or back. I could take the trash out, but I couldn't mow the lawn. That's about the level of how strict that house arrest was.
And did they accuse you of violence or something to justify that level of restriction?
No, it was even written in the criminal complaint from the very outset that I didn't do any violence, and I basically didn't do anything besides be there. So I ended up, I had the same charges as you and Dr. Gold. And then I ended up with 60 days from a plea agreement to one of the misdemeanors.
Right.
And so that's how I ended up with a 60-day sentence. But I had a year of supervision where the judge actually called for, he included computer monitoring restriction in my sentence, because he said he didn't like that I went on a 5-minute segment on Tucker Carlson when he was back on Fox News, because he considered it to be misinformation and disinformation. So basically 1984 in real life happened to me. We appealed it. We actually had a favorable decision from the appeals court, but then they sent it back to the district court, where the same judge actually ruled to reinstate it. And so then we appealed it again, but the clock ran out on it. So I never actually really got resolution on that. But one thing happened while I was in prison that I noticed that applies to all J6ers, which is I ended up finding out by talking to one of the lieutenants that what they call SIS has us designated as domestic terrorists, all J6ers, top down from DC order. So there's no due process with that, because even though the prosecution wanted me to be designated a terrorist, the judge didn't give me a terrorism sentencing enhancement. So it really is a due process violation. And one thing, the way that affected us is that the way they would look at our communications was through the lens that we're in a gang. So it would be delayed, and they wouldn't actually give you your mail until they thoroughly looked through to make sure there's nothing illegal in it first, which means, for example, I had one piece of mail that came in 3 weeks later than it was postmarked, whereas other people are getting things in a timely manner. And that has to do with the mail and the email. But I did want to touch on the conversation about investigations, because one of the things that I've been really heavily involved in through the past 4 years has been investigation of video and various things like that. And of course, put out a documentary every year since January 6th with StopHate.com, along with some others. And the first one was Writing History in 2021. The next one was Bloody Hill in 2022. And then we put out 1,000 Days of Terror, 1,000 Days After J6. And that's about 5 minutes long, but it shows where Joshua Black got shot in the face at 1:06 p.m., which really ignited most of what happened on January 6th. People don't really realize to this day. And then, of course, January 6th, A True Timeline, which Tucker Carlson said should be the most famous movie in the country.
Yep.
But it's not. And then actually, we're putting out a new movie called Pardon Us, Justice for All. And that's going to be put out today. So that is going to be at pardonusmovie.com or pardonusfilm.com.
Okay.
But I think also on the Stop Hate website itself, if you go to stophate.com/J6, that's been a place where we've had calls to action for people, how to help J6ers, that we've been trying to tell people through the years about how to write letters to people while they're in prison, pray for the J6ers, join the Prisoners Record prayer group, and look at all the fundraisers, which for the most part have been Give, Send, Go fundraisers as a Christian alternative to GoFundMe, because we get banned everywhere. I've been banned like 12 places. But another thing on there is if you click on, there's the J6 documentaries, you can see not only ours, but the Epoch Times and other J6 documentaries listed both left and right on there. But we also have a page, J6 Research. And on there, if you scroll down, there's a section called Deep State Leaders. And I've actually got any leads that I have thought of listed on there from the top down. So it includes, like Ivan was talking about, the Capitol Police Board, but it's got, Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and different, deep state actors and the things that we know. But the thing that, and then at the bottom, a link to a really good Substack post that Ivan Raiklen put, which really does detail a lot of that type of stuff. But the thing that I think we need to keep in mind is that this is through investigation we've done through civil, citizen journalists and a lot of crowdsourced information, and then some mainstream media reporting. But and a lot of it also has to do with information that me and David Summerall were able to see in the DOJ's global database that most people don't have access to. Tucker had access to a little bit. Joe Hanneman and some of the team over there at Epoch Times have had a little bit of access to that. But we can look at it and it's sensitive and we can't publish it. So some of the information we can find out, but we can't put the videos out there. Then eventually the J6 committee, not the J6 committee, but the subcommittee, put out a lot of the footage, but it's still not all the footage. So it's pretty important that not just, for one thing,
Can I
everyone
jump in real
realize
quick about the
that
footage real quick,
information
Daniel?
about J6 is coming from these independent people and not from the government. But number two, the government does have access that we don't have. And so whether that be Congress or that DOJ and the FBI, now that we have control of those as Republicans and as Trump, we actually need to be utilizing those to find out the things that we couldn't be finding. So I actually would like to be on a team with the FBI or whoever has that kind of sensitive access. If they could add me to that, I would love to be working on that, because there's a lot more information that needs to come out. But we need to be pressuring Congress with the new J6 committee to do the research that they haven't done. Of course, the last one obviously destroyed a bunch of the interviews and evidence.
And we need to call them account for that as well.
Yeah. But then also we need to put pressure that the DOJ and the FBI, they need to be investigating and prosecuting this. I've been saying since before President Trump got the January 20th inauguration that we've got about 3 prongs that we need to really focus on. We need, restorative justice, number one. But number two, through reparations. Number two, we need recognition. For example, 4 people died that day. Even Trump is out there still saying 1 person. He recently maybe said 2 before that and then kind of went back to 1. Because we know that there's Ashley Babbitt, Roseanne Boyland,
Kevin Greason and Benjamin Phillips.
Kevin Greason and Benjamin Phillips. So we need national holiday, January 6th, Patriot Day, Patriots Day. I don't know if we use the S or not. We need monuments commemorating the deaths of these heroes, these martyrs, these patriots.
Yep.
And, there should also be recognition of at least some, if not all, J6ers through getting presidential medals. So that's recognition. So we need and then the third thing we need is retribution. And that's where it comes in with the FBI,
government accountability portion.
And the DOJ needs to prosecute.
Yeah, Daniel, you summarized it really well. That kind of is the full scope of what we describe as restorative justice. We talk about victim recovery and government accountability. You listed several items there. Ivan, please jump in on the investigation aspect to eventually arrive at government accountability and retribution.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that a couple of you weren't here last week. I want to make sure everybody's synchronized on this. So here's what I'm tracking in terms of the Loudermilk Committee.
Yeah.
So back when the 119th Congress started, Barry Loudermilk, this is my internal sources, told me that they were trying to create a separate committee that Speaker Johnson would create so that Loudermilk could continue the investigation into January 6th. Well, apparently there's some folks like the former House I should say he's still the House Administration Chairman, Brian Stile, did not want that to take place. And so the compromise, if you will, was to put Loudermilk's committee underneath the Judiciary Committee as a subcommittee. And then Brian Stile, by the way, Brian Stile is Paul Ryan's replacement from Wisconsin's 1st Congressional District. He used to be Paul Ryan's driver and then became a congressman. And so he's carrying Paul Ryan's water as kind of like the ambassador envoy inside of Congress to make sure that Paul Ryan's fingerprints are nowhere to be exposed in anything, right? So let's take a look at what the current state is. So right now, the negotiations are still being discussed on the scope of jurisdiction of Barry Loudermilk's subcommittee.
This is insane.
The bad guys, if you will, are trying to limit the scope of the jurisdiction so that it's only going to be, his subcommittee can only cover FBI and DOJ transgressions, which fall under judiciary. Well, guess what that does? That means that Loudermilk cannot investigate and look deeper into every single person from Speaker's office to the Capitol Police Board, to the senior officials of the Capitol Police, and to the transgressions of the lower level officials in the U.S. Capitol Police like Harry Dunn, David Lazarus, Acanilo Ganell, Julie Farnham. I mean, I got the whole list. Or even looking into the general counsel of the U.S. Capitol Police, which I argue is the golden key to the kingdom of everything.
Yeah.
Because he's the one that's been in place before, during, and after, and still is in place as the senior most official of the legislative branch as it relates to January 6th. So these are the internal fightings that are going on. And guess what? The committee and subcommittee haven't even been designated yet. Has anybody heard of them being designated and voted in? No. So that's what's going on behind the scenes. And if we kind of expose that this discussion and deliberation is going on, we might be able to get enough of a public kind of pressure campaign to force the issue for Speaker Johnson to finally designate a subcommittee. But it's going to be already weakened because of all these internal dynamics, which goes back to what David said. We can't wait on them to do this.
So, Ivan, what do you,
what's going on?
What should we do right now, then?
They're going to have to be our witnesses, okay? We're the credible, legitimate panel, if you will, of January 6th that is years ahead of anything that the legitimate committee is supposed to have uncovered. Like, we should invite them. We should invite Barry Loudermilk to testify before our committee so that he can give us an update. Because at this point, he's not going to be able to do it in the official channels of good old Mikey Johnson.
Well, I think there should be a panel of J6ers, including me and people like me who are good investigators, like like Tommy Tatum or some others of us, AJ Fisher, and we should be able to be doing investigation, whether it be for the DOJ or the FBI or for Congress, or I don't know, maybe Trump can appoint some sort of a task force, but we can't just leave this to these people. And we need that access that we don't have as just regular. Like if we could do it right now, we would. We've put out, like I said, all these documentaries and all this information, but it's really not enough. We need more access to the sensitive stuff. And we definitely need to keep up the public pressure campaign to make sure that Congress and the DOJ and the FBI are not slacking on their duties here, and that J6 needs to be a central issue for them, because it is a central issue for the American people, and it's a central issue for Donald Trump. And that's why we voted him in. And when I say we, I mean the American people. And we're supposed to have a golden era now. So we need that accountability.
100%. And part of the mission of We Are J6, of course, is to try to create the platform for that collection of the public sharing of stories, sharing of information, the citizen investigative journalism that you're talking about, Daniel, so that we can platform that, hopefully force multiply that. I would be happy to invite Congressman Loudermilk to come and testify here or share an update here, because I don't know where else to go. So we're just going to build this ourselves, because that's who we are as Americans, and that's what we need to do at this time right now.
I got to comment on what Daniel just said. So we have strength at the top with President Trump. We have strength in our base. The MAGA base is on our side. We got a lot of strength there. What we need to do is get the weenies in the middle, I guess you can call them, or the softer people in the middle to act. So yeah, I think President Trump could do his own, create his own panel. I think Kash Patel is a strong point. Exactly. I think Kash Patel can be encouraged to do with the FBI what Elon Musk did when he took over Twitter. Just throw the doors open, he can on his own show all the internal communications between the FBI and the clerks for the judges, for example. I'm sure that happened. So he can show all the dirty backroom communications from the lens of the FBI. That could happen right now. And I think that would help. And along with Ivan's idea, I think it's a good idea of us having our own investigation that prompts them to do, we're doing the work for them, and it makes it easier for them in some ways. It's carrot and stick. But I think that all go together at the same time. There's no reason why we can't go straight to President Trump through someone, I hope, and say, you should create your own executive panel, make sure this is getting done. And that puts pressure on the DOJ, and it puts pressure on Congress. I put the DOJ in the same category as Congress. There's a lot of institutional crap that's going on that's from the old guard inside of both institutions. I have the most confidence in Kash Patel right now.
I just want to mention that my Twitter got banned during Elon Musk era, January 29. So
mine too. Yeah.
David, please go ahead.
Yeah. So a couple things. Stuart, you talked about the weenies in the middle, and that's why I brought up the elections for the midterms. you're not going to attract and persuade the legislature as it's presently constituted, because many of them did not want there to be exposure of a rigged and stolen election on November 3rd. And so we have to continue to hammer home this nexus point. Why is it that the legislature isn't as invested in getting to the bottom of what happened on J6? And the answer is because it has a direct bearing on what happened on November 3rd. And if we agree with Trump that the election was rigged and stolen, you're attacking the very power that these legislators presumably have, because if you've got some level of taint there, there's a vested interest to not look under the hood and cut off your own legs. So I want to make sure
there's also the reality that the same way that they violated state election law, they also violated federal election law. The Help America Vote Act was directly violated across the country in 2020. So a lot of these congressmen are not actually legitimately seated. They didn't have constitutional elections or legal elections.
And that's why I think this EO, we cannot look past the executive order that Trump just put out, because it's not to suggest that we're going to have this kumbaya moment where people that have ignored the J6 community will all of a sudden jump on board. But it does give us an opportunity to have a clean slate and actually build on the House and Senate leads. Some of the investigations that we've looked at, look, we should have had a super majority. We should have had 60 U.S. senators. Any expert worth their salt would tell you that the people of Nevada were screwed out of a U.S. senator. Carrier Lake.
Yeah.
And this is not just speculative. I actually met with the top attorney for Thomas Massie, and I saw videos and I saw pictures of the Runbeck facility in Arizona after election day, with pallets full of tens of thousands of ballots that were being loaded onto Penske trucks headed for California. Why is that relevant? There are 20 House races that were in the column of Republicans are going to win. And over the next 2 months, every one of those Republicans went to the Democrat column. And so we have to solve that problem if we're going to attract the legislative part of this. You're not going to go into appeal to their reason, because they are entrenched with keeping up this narrative that things are more or less okay. And I want to touch on one more thing, because I share Dr. Gold's cynicism. The law is the law. Brady versus Maryland is very clear. But the reason why I want to bring this up one more time is that there is post-conviction relief. So if you have one of these great cases dealing with a J6er, and you have the highest court in the land say out loud, just through a rudimentary analysis of Brady versus Maryland, how this works. And I'll give you an example. The Inspector General Horowitz admitted through the report that there was at least 26 embedded agents that were there.
Way
on
more than
those
that.
grounds alone. That's not counting for the cell teams that they likely were working with, which probably gets you in the hundreds. That could turn into a ruling where judgments are vacated. Okay, so this isn't about rewriting Brady. This is about applying Brady. And if you vacate judgments, what does that do with the black cloud related to pardons? What does that do for Stuart Rhodes, who had a commuted sentence? So what I'm saying is there's an elegant way here. If the Supreme Court would actually apply black letter law, and it doesn't mean that you get like a complete mulligan. I don't want to suggest that by vacating it that the book is closed. But if you've got a DOJ that opts not to refile a criminal complaint to go after the J6ers, you can basically close a chapter on this and strengthen the position of 1,500 Americans that now have judgments that are vacated, and a strong message from a Pam Bondi or Kash Patel that they're not going to renew a prosecution. So don't count that out. It's a huge weapon that they can wield if they do so with wisdom.
Well, I think we need to continue the demand for these things to happen, because there's various ideas and options that the government is set up to do. They are empowered to do, but they don't do those things by and large. So I'm interested in what we can be doing right now to crank up the heat, like a lot. We said that President Trump is, of course, strong. Kash Patel, we believe, is strong. Kash Patel leads the FBI now. Dan Bongino oh my goodness, I know that guy is thinking clearly. He's second in command at the FBI. So how do we coordinate a specific campaign targeted towards the attention of Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, to Daniel's point about we need access to the sensitive level information to execute the investigations that have to happen. And we're not going to sit around waiting for some congressman to never do it. But if we need such access, we need to apply the public demand for that to happen.
That's
Yeah, I think we
on
need
the
to rock to gum by demanding that public pressure on those people, the DOJ, the FBI, and the Congress, and doing our own investigation at the same time as much as we can without that access.
Yeah, on the point that Simone Gold made earlier too, I don't think the issue is the need for new laws and the need for like changing laws. I think that the need is just enforcing the laws that are all.
Did we lose you, Joshua?
My opinion, the issue with January 6th is a different problems. Did I drop? The issue with January 6th is it's kind of the central issue of a lot of different problems. It ties, of course, into the problems of, why was this kept in a district court? Why were these cases not allowed to go to the states and local courts? Why, for example, did he not have, in my opinion, really due process? Why were people denied exculpatory evidence? Like Stuart Rhodes, for example, denied exculpatory evidence. Why did that take place? How are there American citizens engaging in otherwise constitutionally protected acts who are being charged as terrorists for misdemeanors? And in most of the cases were just misdemeanors. And so, you go across the board, even to the issue of, election integrity, which was the entire basis of the protest to begin with. Really, this ties into so many different areas that I think the reason why a lot of people don't want to touch the issue is because you touch it and you have to resolve all these additional problems in order to resolve the Jan 6 issue. And so I do think for Trump now, and I believe Kash Patel, who was very outspoken about this, and Kash was one of the original whistleblowers, noting some of the real key findings that we even had in our documentaries about January 6th. Mm-hmm. I do think the current administration is aware of it, but it's going to require so many different elements to repair it. And I do believe that's also why some of the work being done here is so important, because it does address a lot of the fundamental, let's say, lack of enforcement / overreach that did take place.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure that we show this new persecution testimonial. As we've mentioned before, we're building wearej6.com as a platform for J6 patriots, former defendants, and the entire nation rallying together to pursue restorative justice in its many facets. But as we've mentioned, the huge core of that is the truth of what happened, names and faces to these people that are victims. They're real Americans, brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers, coworkers and neighbors. And so we need the public to see and get to know these people. These live streams we do every week are part of that. We hope that the audience will continue to share, retweet, register at wearej6.com and help to amplify this movement. And also that you'll help to share these persecution testimonials. They'll be posted very soon to social media and the website, as well. Yes, for sure, Ivan, as well as additional materials that are coming to the website. So stay tuned for that. Ivan, you said you had a clip?
Yeah, I'm on an iPad, so I don't think I can share it from this. I sent it to you via text. Do you want me to resend it to you so it's fresh right there?
No, let me see. Yeah, send it to me again because I don't see it in my text from you. But send that in. Let's go ahead and launch this persecution testimonial so you guys can all see that and then get your reaction to this.
John, just one
3 minutes and I left. Of course, I had no criminal.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were about to. I just want to say, because people have commented, that although we do want you to submit short videos, we are going to edit them for you, just like what you see this video. It's not, the person didn't do just 5 minutes. So just do your best. And we literally have editors who will make them into the right length. Thank you.
inside for 3 minutes and I left. Of course, I had no criminal intent. Job applications being denied due to my tarnished reputation. The worst of all, my fiance gave me back the ring. Hello, my name is Cameron Clapp from Cambria, California. I decided to go to DC and join the protest January 6, 2021 for multiple reasons, not only for the rampant election fraud going on, but at the time I was at university studying sociology and very interested in social movements, social justice. And this was a historical event that President Trump said, show up and have your voices be heard. So I answered the call. Besides, my family lineage goes all the way back to the sons and daughters of the revolution, even farther back to the Mayflower. And I felt a sense of honor and duty to be there because I'm an American patriot. Personally, my objectives that day were to observe from a sociological perspective the events of J6, including collecting material for my college project. Let me be clear, I do not have a criminal record. I did not commit any acts of violence or vandalism that day. Specifically, what I did was listen to President Trump's speech, join the Save America March, and when I got to the Capitol grounds later in the day, the Capitol building, where I was at, doorways were not barricaded or blocked from entry by any Capitol Police, nor did they tell me to leave when I got in there. I was inside for 3 minutes, took a photograph, and I left. Of course, I had no criminal intent. I was charged with 4 counts, of which each federal offense was considered a misdemeanor. During my court proceedings, I felt influenced at the time into going against my own moral and ethical values due to the highly polarized and politicized climate, the massive hostility from the media, and the most important, the high conviction rates of the J6 cases coming out of the DC courts, not to mention the incompetent counsel of my former public defender. Unfortunately, all these troubling circumstances, among many other factors, contributed to the feeling a sense of coercion into false guilty plea. My sentencing punishments ordered by the judge were for 2 misdemeanors, basically for disorderly conduct plus demonstrating in a Capitol building. Now, although I do recognize the compassion from the judge during sentencing, however, I was sentenced with 12 concurrent months probation, $500 restitution, 100 hours community service. Also, the extension of my conditions for surrendered passport and firearms were restricted. The substantial harm to my life that was caused has damaged me severely by the federal charges, particularly the subsequent collateral consequences. For example, the termination and resignation from my former career and dream job. You see, as a multiple limb amputee, I've transcended my physical adversity, not only to be an example, but to be of service to military veterans, children, and many others. I've worked with teaching how to walk on prosthetic legs and to live independently. But suddenly this came to a screeching halt. You see, as a result, the ramifications piled up on me. Where my former job once gave me a sense of life purpose, now I struggled with this life crisis. You know, financially, I experienced income and housing insecurities. You know, I struggled and faced, public stigmatization, job applications being denied due to my tarnished reputation, personal relations with my family strained, to the point that, the worst of all, my fiance gave me back the ring. Absolutely heartbreaking. My psychological state could probably be borderline diagnosis for suffering from PTSD in relation to these traumas inflicted on me by this past tyrannical administration. January 6th was a turning point in my life. While it was a catastrophe, it also transformed me into a stronger, more principled person. I've changed for the better, gaining clarity about who I am and what I stand for today. J6 unfairly villainized average Americans who questioned the vote or supported President Trump. My professional career and purpose-driven life was derailed, but I've remained committed to perseverance and standing to my core principles. Despite sacrifices, I see my journey as a spiritual warrior to protect what I love and uphold my integrity. And remember this: never compromise your integrity, even if it means standing alone. I encourage others to take personal responsibility, live with integrity, and work toward unity and healing. Restorative justice for January 6th must involve reconciliation through uncovering the truths of that day, exposing the weaponization of power, and holding these systems accountable. Only by restoring trust in our institutions can we move forward together with integrity and unity. I am Cameron Clapp. I am a January 6th defendant, and I'm one of thousands harmed by this weaponized government. We are your American brothers and sisters, and we are hurting. We are J6. Please help us deliver restorative justice.
The American people need to see these stories of political persecution. Please share them widely and join us at wearej6.com to help deliver restorative justice through victim recovery and government accountability.
Wow. Every time, it's just shocking and moving and illuminating. You learn new layers, and but again, you get to see, like, these are real people. And I think that's been missing from the country, from the conversation. So we're really hoping to bring that to the forefront of this. So we're just really grateful for everyone that's willing to share a story. Again, please continue to share wearej6.com and encourage everyone to register there as an advocate to support this, but particularly anyone who is a former defendant, register there with the defendant registration so we can get you the information to share your story via the videos and also on the live streams. Anybody have any thoughts?
No, you talked about the feeling coerced, and that's kind of the dirty secret in the legal profession, is that every single plea bargain is coerced to one degree or another. You're being, like, as President Trump said in his Meet the Press interview, the guy's given a choice of 2 years in prison or 30 years in prison if he dares to exercise his right, to confront his accusers. And so they take a deal, and it's always coerced. But then they of course, part of the deal is you sign a statement saying that you're not being coerced. And everybody knows it's a coercion. The defense attorneys know it, the prosecutor knows it, the judge knows it, the defendant knows it, but they all pretend like it's not. Just like when they suborn perjury, which also happens across the board. A lot of people are coerced into bearing false testimony, but then they sign a statement saying that I'm saying this because it is in fact true and I'm not being coerced in any way. And everyone knows that they're being coerced into lying on the stand. They're committing perjury. It's a conspiracy to commit perjury. Defense attorneys, prosecutors, everyone's involved in it, including the judge. They all know. That's the kabuki theater across the spectrum in our legal system. J6 has a chance, a rare chance, to expose that problem and maybe begin a process of fixing it. That's why you're going to have institutional resistance to any kind of reform, J6 driven, because they don't want that system. All the lawyers in Congress is full of lawyers.
Yep.
All of them believe in that system and want to defend it. And this is a problem because that system is unjust and abusive. Your First Amendment rights were destroyed decades ago through the application of conspiracy. It's been done to many Americans across the country and entrapment. It's not just us. We're just bringing to light what I knew as a former defense attorney, I knew was already a problem across the spectrum. It's been going on for a long, long time. So I don't know if we're going to be able to fix it, but we have a chance. And we can lead the charge for that. But it's not just us. It's about fixing it for every other American, because otherwise they'll all be vulnerable.
Yes.
I just want to share very briefly, because sometimes when you listen to the conversation, it can feel very heavy and you can feel like I'm just one person. What can I do? But actually one person can do a lot. That's why we're doing these short videos. It can do a lot. There's a very, a quote that I grew up learning from my religious heritage, which is a famous quote in Judaism, which is, "It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it," right? We don't have the obligation to do the job of the DOJ and the job of the president, but it is our job to do what we can. And so what everyone can do is share these stories. These stories are so powerful. I know that, like the Epoch Times movie, I know the Capital Punishment, Nick Searcy movie, this changed more minds than than a lot of legal strategies. And that's something everyone on this call who is a J6 defendant or a family member should feel empowered in their own life to do, that your story could actually change things downstream. And so you should feel more powerful, more hopeful, not less. That is really my wish for everybody. And it's absolutely what I believe.
And there was a great story about the Oath Keepers, and Stuart, you are part of that group, and
I'm the guy that started it.
Can I share?
The founder. So yeah, please, Dr. Go tell that story, because the Oath Keepers have been so incredibly maligned, demonized, and misrepresented. Proud Boys as well. I'm sure there are other militia groups and just other stereotypes and parts of the false narrative. But the Oath Keepers was a very particular and interesting one, and we had a direct encounter with that will highlight how backwards, upside down, and just evil the false narratives of the whole January 6th insurrection, terrorism campaign was.
One of the handicaps I think decent people face in their life is that they're busy and they don't always know all the details of every other person's situation, because we're not spending all of our time in the nefarious underworld of plotting, right? So the reason I was there and John was there that day is I was due to speak, on the east side of the Capitol with a permit, et cetera. But we were going from the Ellipse to the east side of the Capitol. And as everybody knows, there was probably at least, I think, more than 1 million people in the Capitol that day. And it was absolutely jammed. I was actually glad to hear President Trump say that, because I think it was over 1 million people. It was absolutely jammed. But anyway, to snake our way through the crowd was really difficult. So there's about 20 of us in a Congo line. And I just was, focused on our part. But one of my team members said, "Oh, we've got these people," basically he described it to me as, "We've got big, strong guys who will help, get us from point A to point B." And I honestly don't remember if he said who they were, what they were, but I didn't think about it. But there were, kind of strong men just helping getting us through the crowd. And frankly, I'm sorry, I didn't meet any of them. I didn't pay that much attention. And I actually never knew until about 1.5 years later, my criminal defense attorney just called me up and said, and explained to me that the people who helped us, John and myself, were oath keepers. I just think about it. So I just want to share this with you, because I didn't even know. But what I knew was, in real time, there were these strong, muscular men who were helping shield us, acting kind of as a lay security from point A to point B. And she wanted to know if I would testify that that's what they were. And I couldn't get the yes out of my mouth quickly enough. And that's kind of just such a minor little detail. But I'm telling you, and John can tell you, they were helping us do exactly what they said they were doing. I'm sure, Stuart, you didn't know me. I didn't know you, but I can attest to the fact that that's what you were doing. And it's frustrating that these stories aren't out. And maybe that's what I'll do my 5-minute story on.
Yeah, no, these details are really important. And, week by week, we continue to discover new elements, new truths. You just continue to paint a picture with each stroke. So I think
you know why it's so important to tell that your story from your lens through it is that part of the false narrative is that no one was going to go to the Capitol until President Trump, told them to go there. That's completely false. We were already planning on being at permitted events around the Capitol grounds. Simone was going to speak at one of them. That was for Alexander's event in Area 8. And then also there was the Latinos for Trump event, Area 7. And there were like 6 other, I think it was a total like 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 permitted events all around the Capitol.
Yep.
And that's what was already going to happen before President Trump said anything. So in fact, when he spoke, he didn't say, now I want you to go to the Capitol. He said, now you're going to go to the Capitol. Because he knew they were already going to be going there for permitted events that were long planned. And it's so frustrating to hear this false spin that, no one had any business being near the Capitol. They're all supposed to stay down at the Ellipse rally only, but only until President Trump told them to go there. Then his mob, stormed the Capitol. It's just completely false, upside down, Orwellian creep show. Anyway, drives me crazy.
And it's within the area that the DOJ or whoever later designated as a restricted area. Like, how can you say it's a restricted area when it's literally got permitted events already there? So,
right.
And they've been saying that the whole time. And then they talk about these fences that were put up, were these tiny little bike rack fences. And those are the same kind of bike rack fences that were lining the streets on the way there. And people were walking on both sides of them. So why would we think you couldn't go across them? Well, maybe because these little signs that say it's restricted, but those got taken down before most people even got there.
Yeah,
but then the other thing is they said it's because the Secret Service was protecting Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. But actually, those fences were put up just because of the inauguration scaffolding construction. And it had nothing to do with the Secret Service.
Well,
so
and we were all
prosecuted
with 1752, which is entering and remaining in a restricted building or grounds. And that law specifically refers to a restriction that is set by the United States Secret Service, which they did not set a restriction. So it wasn't a restriction set by the Secret Service, which means 1752 was illegally applied to everyone that it was applied to. And essentially underwrites or undermines their narrative that there was a restriction at all. That was
another part of that entrapment was that in November and December, in those rallies, there were no restrictions about being on the grass around the Capitol. You could go right up to the building. They had a little perimeter around the building itself. So for November and December, the perimeter around the building was very tight. And on January 6th, though, they expanded it, immensely. How could anyone know coming from the Ellipse towards the Capitol that there'd been this change when by the time they got there, like you said, all the bike wraps are gone. All they know is that just like in November and December, there's people standing around the building. So no one knew they weren't supposed to be there. It's just total ridiculous. But I think that's part of the entrapment was to expand the perimeter and not really let anybody know,
Yeah, and they did it after the fact. Who knows if they even thought about doing that and saying that was the restricted area until afterwards. But the point is, the people who were there had no idea. And it was definitely an entrapment. So we need to get these communications. I don't know whose communications we need to get, whether it's Nancy Pelosi or Muriel Bowser, whoever was talking to the Capitol Police or the Metro Police earlier or in the week preceding that, or maybe even more than that. But that's the kind of thing that we need to be looking into.
I agree. Something I want us to be able to do as a community at We Are J6 is to help collect and platform important information, whether it's investigative efforts or some of the great work that you guys are doing at Stop Hate, Daniel. So the new movie that you have, pardonusfilm.com. So we encourage people to go and watch and support that film and the efforts that they're doing there. We have many other groups. We'll have a page on the website at wearej6.com, an alliance page just to highlight the various different people and groups that are fighting on the ground in their various capacities. And we want to encourage all of you to collaborate, support, and advance these efforts. Ivan, you've continued to do a lot of really important investigative work. I want to continue to invite you to champion that, to trumpet that. Let us know as a We Are J6 platform how we can help you in what you're doing, because as Daniel mentioned, we need more of this information. We need pressure put on some of these public officials that need to give us the information or do their jobs or whatever the case may be. Just before we wrap up today, let us know how we can kind of help champion that work.
Can you, if you don't mind, can we close out with that 1-minute video?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me play that right now. And boom.
If an officer has observed some transgression of his protectee that was maybe so egregious, does that also give that officer some leverage in keeping their job?
Of course.
In the event that that officer
Made a mistake.
has made a mistake or has committed a transgression themselves.
100%.
So let me go into a little bit more detail on that. So let's just say, can I use you as an example?
Use me.
Let's just say Tarek Johnson is observing a Speaker of the House doing a naughty thing. But Tarek Johnson also did a naughty thing. Let's just call both naughty things totally illegal, that everyone would deem to be illegal. Does anything happen to either of you in that situation?
How would it? I'm not going to tell on myself. The member of Congress is not going to tell on themselves. I'm not going to tell on the member of Congress because that member of Congress knows what I did, or vice versa.
Yep.
Yeah, so the point there of the entire interview that I did with Tarek Johnson was to lay out the whole structure of the U.S. Capitol Police, the legal justification, authorities, mission, jurisdiction, etc., and then the mechanisms at play that allow them to cover up from themselves. And we start to expose individual actors, and then when you apply that to January 6th, everything makes sense. And once I release this, I'm still in the editing of it. I would expect that every single U.S. Capitol Police officer is going to watch that, to include the very highest folks, because we're getting into specific names and corruption, as well as every member of Congress, particularly at the senior level. And I think you're going to start seeing those that weren't complicit or newer officers. You're going to see a deluge of whistleblowers, if you will, to start to reach out to Tarek Johnson, reach out to myself, and the chatter's going to start. And I think the rats are going to start squealing. We're getting close.
Very good. Keep it up. Joshua Phillip, thank you for joining us today. It was amazing. Epic Times has been doing incredible work. Any closing comments from you and how we can support what you and Epic Times are doing?
No, but it's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I think I've covered the stories of a few of you here, and it's been quite the journey. I will say I do think that January 6th is kind of the thread hanging out of the cloth when it comes to a lot of the problems that happened over the past 4 years. And I do think that as these other issues are resolved, it'll probably circle back to this. And I also think that's why, there is a lot going on. If you look at Donald Trump right now, some of executive orders which were mentioned here, especially the ones securing the elections, even his orders, for example, clearing the way maybe to even overturn some of Biden's pardons. These things could open the doors for the investigations, which I do think are going to happen. And I do believe that really is part of alleviating some of what happened over the past 4 years. This does need to be reinvestigated. And I do think it is going to happen. So, thank you for having me. Check out my show, of course, Crossroads with Joshua Phillip. And thanks again.
Absolutely. David, Stuart, Daniel, any closing comments before we wrap today? We really appreciate all of you guys participating.
I'll speak for myself. I'm just thankful to be a part of this. Many people here have my admiration over the past 4 years because you've stuck to it. And I think Stuart mentioned the separation of the wheat from the chaff. The people that are still fighting today, you just get a sense that they're not going to quit until we make this right. personal plug for the documentary I put out a year ago was Let My People Go. It's not the definitive, I think, J6 documentary. I think Daniel's probably got the monopoly on that. But to the degree that it integrates the stolen election with the plight of the J6ers, I think it is the most definitive breakdown of just how compromised our election systems are. And I would invite anyone to watch that. It's for free on Rumble, YouTube. Just put in Let My People Go documentary. And then Rachel Alexander, I want to give her a shout out. She put out a series of articles on what I've been through over the past 4 years dealing with perpetual investigations from the disciplinary board for advocating for J6ers, for advocating for free and fair elections. And so not all of us are J6ers by virtue of being there at the Capitol, but I can tell you right now, I lost my career, and it was a great career because of my advocacy for J6. I went on ABC News within a week of J6, called it a false flag, have never wavered. And so I am a former law professor to the degree that I've stood with those that were there at the Capitol, and I've had your back the whole way. And I think there's another honorary member, which would be Tina Peters. And I'm so glad to see that Ivan has put her name up, because Tina, by virtue of her courageous actions in getting a forensic image of Dominion, and let's make no mistake, there were 29,000 election records that were either modified or destroyed. She caught them, and she had experts that validated this. And right now she's in. So while we can celebrate Jeremy Brown getting out, while we can celebrate those blanket pardons, she has vindicated the J6er for being at DC.
That's right.
I mean, she basically provided a factual basis that you weren't crazy for being there to protest. Right. And so I hope and pray that whatever leverage the DOJ has to exert on Colorado officials, that they will move swiftly so she'll be freed.
Amen. Stuart, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you coming on. I'd love to have you again sometime and continue to shed light on the misperceptions of what the Oath Keepers are. And you know, you're very up to speed with a lot of dirty details as far as what happened on January 6th and so forth. And we want to continue breaking down that narrative with this platform. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us as well. We're actually really proud of you and the work that you've been doing with Stop Hate and the documentaries. I know you're going to continue to do that, and we'll continue to help to share and support that work. Dr. Gold, of course, thank you always for your legal insight and support of the project here. If anyone has a closing comment, please throw that out. Otherwise, I will go ahead and go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, so right now, besides Tina Peters, we've got 3 J6ers incarcerated, Edward Kelly, Taylor Taranto, and Elias Constianis. And they're trying to get Dan Wilson back in on Thursday, I believe. So we need to make sure that we keep the pressure and try to get those people to be completely free. And yeah, I just wanted to highlight the point of David Clements saying that really all of J6 stuff does stem back to the election integrity issue. Obviously, everyone knows that's why we were there that day. But just a provocative question, why would a congressperson care what their constituents think if they got in via a rigged election? Because they're not going to fear not being reelected, because they can just get in the same way they got in last time. So we have to think pretty creatively about what is going to cause a person in the House of Representatives or the Senate to want to actually help us, or, you know, and for one thing, a lot of them, they're likely we're in on it. So
replace them. That's all you can do. You got to primary them out. You got to purge them out of the GOP.
Also want to mention that there's a website, civlib.org. That's a new J6 organization that probably needs to be highlighted right now.
Yes, sir. We've had
Say it again. What is it?
Civlib.org, as in civil liberties. Civlib.org. That's
not to be confused with libtard.
Yes. And that's Brian Mock. We've had him on previously at wearej6.com, and we'll continue to support the efforts that he's doing as well. And yeah, the mission continues. The stories need to continue to be shared. And so we thank everyone for joining us today. We ask you to continue to support wearej6.com, register, share, cycle these stories. If you're a former defendant, click the defendant registration and register so that we can get you an invitation to share your story on a live stream, an invitation to put together a persecution testimonial. And the fight absolutely goes on. So we will see all of you guys next Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Thanks everyone so much for joining and participating. We're really grateful. And may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Thank you.